In a world where medical discoveries evolve every single day, there remains a quiet truth that slips through the cracks of busy hospitals and rushed consultations, a truth that a 91-year-old neurologist finally decided to reveal after watching countless lives change before his eyes. And it begins with something so subtle, so familiar, that most of us never even notice it happening until the damage has already taken root. He says that strokes and dementia, the two conditions we fear most as we age, are rarely sudden, mysterious attacks that come without warning, but rather the results of long-lasting patterns we tend to overlook, especially one silent habit that millions of people repeat from morning to night, without even realizing it. A habit he calls the silent tightening, a constant unconscious tension that settles in the jaw, neck, and shoulders as we rush through our days, carry our worries, hold our frustrations, and forget to breathe deeply, slowly, and intentionally. And this tension, though invisible and often ignored, slowly restricts the flow of blood and oxygen to the brain, weakens delicate vessels, and creates an internal environment where inflammation thrives and cognitive decline begins long before any symptoms appear. Which is why he insists that protecting the brain is not simply about medicines, supplements, or avoiding certain foods, but about understanding how stress and physical tension are tightly woven together, influencing memory, blood pressure, circulation, and long-term brain wellness more than most people realize. And as he speaks, his voice carries the weight of decades spent watching families struggle, patients decline, and lives transform when small adjustments were finally made. Because according to him, strokes and dementia are often the culmination of thousands of tiny moments when the body quietly cries for relief, but we ignore it. Tightening our neck muscles as we stare at screens, clenching our jaw while handling daily pressures, raising our shoulders as we worry about the future, and holding our breath as we push through exhaustion and frustration. Day after day, year after year, building habits that slowly shape the way blood moves through the body. And because the brain depends on constant, steady circulation to function, anything that restricts that flow becomes a threat over time. A slow disruption that affects memory, clarity, and emotional balance in ways we often brush aside as normal. Aging, even though aging does not have to look like this. As the doctor explained during an interview that changed everything for me, describing how cognitive decline often begins not in the brain itself, but in the muscles around the neck and jaw that tighten due to chronic stress, compressing vital arteries and reducing the oxygen supply the brain desperately needs. And as he shared story after story, one thing became clear. Many people who eventually suffered strokes had shown signs long before, such as frequent neck stiffness, jaw clenching, headaches, dizziness, poor sleep, and mental fog. Yet few realized these were early warnings, that the brain was being deprived of what it needed to stay strong, resilient, and sharp. And he explained that this tension becomes even more dangerous when combined with modern habits such as long hours spent looking down at phones, leaning forward toward screens, and sitting in rigid positions without movement. Habits that disrupt natural posture and intensify the pressure on the arteries that supply the brain, slowly limiting the nourishment that keeps neurons healthy, communication fast, and memory stable. And he emphasized that this slow decline is not inevitable, that many people can prevent it by making one simple change, releasing tension throughout the day, especially in the jaw and neck. Because even a few seconds of awareness, a small pause to loosen the jaw, drop the shoulders, stretch the neck gently, or breathe deeply can dramatically improve blood flow and reduce the stress hormones that damage the brain over time. And he believes that when people learn to break the silent tightening habit, they protect their brain's ability to remain clear and resilient well into their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, reducing the risk of strokes, improving memory, and preserving independence in ways that medications alone cannot achieve. Because while hospitals focus on treating conditions after they occur, wisdom teaches us that prevention often begins with the smallest habits, the quiet choices we make every day, and the awareness we bring into our bodies as we move through our lives. And as he continued to speak, he shared a remarkable observation from decades of practice. People who stay mindful of their breathing, posture, and tension levels tend to age with more grace, more mental clarity, and fewer health emergencies than those who ignore the body's signals. And this is not because they live perfect lives, but because they create space within their day for relaxation, understanding that the brain thrives not in constant pressure but in balance, gentle movement, and natural rhythm. And he explained that chronic tension creates a long-term pattern of reduced blood flow that slowly starves certain parts of the brain, especially those responsible for memory, decision-making, and emotional regulation, creating tiny vulnerabilities that accumulate over time until the brain can no longer fight against the stress load. Which is why he now advises everyone, regardless of age, to begin practicing what he calls micro-relaxation moments, tiny breaks throughout the day where you simply notice your body. Breathe deeply through the nose. Relax your jaw, soften your shoulders, and let your neck fall gently back into alignment, creating a wave of relief that resets your muscles and improves circulation instantly. And while this may sound too simple to matter, he assures us that these micro moments are powerful enough to reduce stroke risk, support memory, balance blood pressure, improve sleep, and reduce inflammation, all because they release the chronic tension that quietly poisons the brain over time. And as he continued, he revealed another truth the hospitals rarely mention. Many strokes happen in people who appear physically fine but have spent years harboring emotional stress without knowing how much their body was absorbing, because emotional tension always becomes physical tension, and physical tension always influences the brain, forming a loop that becomes dangerous if left unbroken. Which is why the doctor believes that emotional well-being and brain health cannot be separated. Because when the mind carries burdens, the fear of aging, the weight of regrets, the pressure of responsibilities, the body responds by tightening, bracing, and preparing for imagined threats, causing the neck and jaw to lock, the shoulders to rise, and breathing to become shallow, a pattern that slowly alters the internal environment of the brain, inviting cognitive decline, memory issues, and vascular problems that many assume are simply fate, even though they are often preventable with awareness, relaxation, and consistent care. And as he shared this perspective, I couldn't help but reflect on how many people carry tension from childhood into old age, never realizing how deeply it affects the body, the heart, and the brain, and how many lives could change simply by learning to slow down, breathe, and relax the muscles that hold our stress. And he added that journals, meditation, gentle stretching, walking in nature, soft music, warm baths, and meaningful conversations can help release lifelong tension, loosening not just the muscles but the emotional weight behind them, giving the brain space to heal, repair, and renew itself. Because the brain is remarkably resilient when we give it what it needs: oxygen, calmness, movement, and emotional peace. And he described how many of his older patients who practiced these relaxation habits developed stronger memories, steadier moods, and healthier blood pressure even in their late 80s and early 90s, while those who ignored the tension patterns often faced more difficulties sooner, demonstrating that age alone is not the enemy. The enemy is chronic tension that goes unaddressed year after year, shaping the brain into a weaker, more vulnerable state. But the good news is this: it is never too late to change the habit. Because the body remembers tension, but it also remembers relaxation. And every time you choose to relax your jaw, breathe slowly, stretch your neck, and release the burdens pressing against your muscles, you are gently telling your brain that it is safe, supported, and free to function at its best. And this message, repeated again and again, becomes a new habit, a healing habit, one that protects the brain from the inside out and supports long-term clarity, stability, and vitality. And as the doctor finished sharing his lifetime of wisdom, his eyes softened with the tenderness of someone who has witnessed both suffering and recovery, reminding us that while hospitals treat diseases, real health is built in the everyday moments we often overlook, in the quiet choices we make, in the gentle awareness we bring to our bodies, and in the wisdom of knowing that small habits shape our future more than we ever imagine. And so today, if you do nothing else, begin with this: unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, breathe deeply, and remember that your brain depends on the calmness you create within your body. Because the simplest act of releasing tension may be the most powerful step you take to protect yourself from stroke, dementia, and the silent threats that try to follow us as we age. But they cannot stay where peace is allowed to grow, where awareness becomes your companion, and where every breath becomes a gift you give to your future self. For more videos, subscribe my channel.